Welcome back. This video is going to be fun. It can be for kids or adults, but it's about being beautiful like Esther. So I love just reading the stories in the Bible and grabbing onto whatever I can and saying, God, do that in me, like whatever that was, like open my eyes, show me things. And so there's so much to be seen in this story, but I'm going to highlight just a few things and we'll just see where it goes. So Esther, this is the time when Israel was in captivity, and God said that, at some point, like he was going to raise up a king. Isaiah prophesied of this king. And so while they were in captivity, Esther was an orphan. Both of her parents died. And so she was raised by her uncle, Mordecai. And, who knows what it was like for her. They're in the nation of Israel's in captivity, so they're under, they're being at some level like they're in captivity because their own sin. So now the generations down are like seeking, they're seeking God for repentance and just to be restored back to Him, but also waiting on His timing, because sometimes it takes time for us to grow in repentance and really receive the fruits of that from a right heart. And they know that that's been prophesied of their release of that and their freedom of that later. So Esther's growing up in this, as a little girl under her uncle, learning how to submit under authority in the midst of, in a foreign place, right? Because they're in captivity. So she's growing up in that world, and there's the king that's from, it's a completely different land, right? It's not her people group, so wasn't raised in the way that she was raised. And this king, we'll just say this, the next video that I'm going to do is about God. I was wrecked this weekend from something God dealt with me about, but there's so much to be said about, there's a throne that's reserved for men in marriage, and there's a throne that's reserved for men just in general in creation. And God created man with a particular throne of authority, and there's a glory and there's a weight of that authority. And us as women, we've been trained in different ways, from different controlling spirits and feministic stuff that was behind that. And it's trained us in a way to dishonor that throne. And it's really wrecked marriages. It's wrecked the identity of our men. And God is working in women to restore femininity, and He's working in men to restore that throne. Women have a particular throne. It's the glory of man is a woman. So it wasn't good for man to be alone. So there is a beauty and a glory that God places in a woman to minister to a man in a particular way. But we need to understand the proper order and the glory that's involved in each of those. But in Esther, so the man, it's very, very dishonoring to the throne that God gave a man. Even when things are messed up and the man's doing things ungodly, it's never okay for the woman to dishonor that throne. And the original queen, beside this king, Xerxes, I think is his name, if I get that right. She dishonored his throne. And whether he was acting in a godly way or not, was not her place to dishonor that throne because of that. So it's never a woman's place to dishonor what God set in order. Because the man is not rightly holding that. There's still a throne of authority, and there's still honor and a glory attached to that. So when she dishonored that, that king said, it's not okay. So the consequence for that queen was she got kicked off her throne. And the king said, and he took in all the virgins, and for a whole year they were being purified. They were going through all this process of purification. Like there was all this, and Esther was one of the virgins that got brought into that place. Now, how this got formed in Esther, she grew up in Israel in captivity under her uncle Mordecai. We don't know the backstory, right, of how this really got formed, because this is a character issue that was formed in her heart. Because in the midst of all these women doing something very differently, she behaved in herself because of what was formed in her, just differently. And what did that look like? I'm just going to highlight one particular thing. So every virgin had a night with the king. And we don't know what happened in that night. That's not part of what is unfolded to us in that story. But she was, and every queen, every virgin that was brought in, the beautiful virgins were brought in. And Esther it says of her that something about her, and I'm going to do some other videos on beauty, because there's the beauty that God puts over a woman is not something that our culture defines as beauty. And sometimes we look at someone and we say something, we knew them before, but there's something different now. And there's a beauty on that person now. And there are reasons why that is. But what made Esther beautiful, I believe, in that moment, because in the story, it's the portion of the story when, she had found favor in the eyes of the keeper of the women. And Hezekiah, I'm not sure his name, but Hezekiah, however you say that, but he was the keeper of the woman, and she found favor in him. She was probably raised to honor authority. And she pleased him, and for whatever reason, and something about who she was and her character. And then she was going to have, so every virgin that had the night with the king, they got to go into his basically like jewelry cabinet. And can you imagine what it was like? A big place where all of his diamonds are. And anything that she wanted to wear for that night, she actually got to keep. Anything. So it probably had the most beautiful jewels and diamonds and all these things. And she got to wear it that night, and then she got to keep it forever, whether the king chose her as queen or not. And you don't know when you're going in whether you're going to be the one that is going to be chosen by the king, right? So we can imagine that queens are like, wow, like I've never been able to choose. Like they're, maybe some of them were slaves or in captivity or whatever. When Esther went in, this is what she did. And I believe that this is part of why there was a beauty that was above any of the other women. She went in, and as she went in, or however the story unfolds, she went to Hezekiah, and she said, who was the keeper of the women, she said, would you please decide what I'll wear for this one night with the king? So she even took herself out of it, and she put herself under his authority, and she said, would you pick? And whatever he picked was what she wore and what she got to keep. So she left that up to him. And that, I believe, is a lot of what made her, that character in her, made her beautiful and more beautiful than any of the other women. Because there's a glory and a beauty and femininity when we honor authority. And we have that in our hearts. So that's just a little story about being beautiful like Esther. And, I totally forgot. Hold on. For all my sisters, there are things that God is doing in us as women and in our brothers as men. And so here's that for us. That's a little fun. All right. Be blessed and have a great week.